So Derrick Pitts, the chief astronomer at the Franklin Institute, joining us now on the phone. Derrick, thank you so much for joining us. This is certainly fairly rare for the East Coast. I think all of us were certainly shaken literally and physically by all of this. Tell us a little bit more about what you're hearing and what you know.
Thanks for having me. What I know is that this is typical for the type of earthquake that's felt in this region every few years. The last time we had an earthquake like this was back in 2011, and it was widely felt around the region. Geologically speaking, there is crustal adjustment going on in this region all the time. There are earthquakes of far lesser magnitude that happen, but we tend not to notice them because of the other background noise of trucks and construction and things like that. So when we get above 3.5 magnitude up into 4 and beyond, that's when we actually start to feel it outside of all the other stuff that's happening. So this is not the type of earthquake that typically causes a lot of damage. There could be some outliers of things that have occurred as a result of this. But I think what most people would say is that they felt it, or maybe they didn't even feel it because of other background noise that's happening around them. And as far as aftershocks are concerned, the lower the magnitude number, the greater the likelihood that there could be an aftershock, but we won't feel it. So it's not typical that we'll have an aftershock of the same magnitude, in this case, for this kind of earthquake.
Yeah, and Derrick, just tell us a little bit more just about the science behind this, because it is such a rarity here to feel something like this, an earthquake on the East Coast. We see it all the time on the West Coast. We've just talked about the tragic, intense earthquake that was felt in Taiwan. We saw those horrific images there. So tell us more about the fault lines around here and why we don't see something as dramatic as what happens usually on the West Coast.
The difference between here and the West Coast is that on the West Coast, we're looking at tectonic plate boundaries. And when tectonic plates collide with each other, they cause, there are tremendous faults, tremendous earthquakes, and tremendous volcanoes because of what's actually happening. I mean, you have whole pieces of continent diving under another piece of continent. And that's not what's going on here on the East Coast at all. A long, long time ago, two continents did collide, but then that split again and created the Atlantic Ocean. We have the suture line that runs up along the Appalachian chain, and we see those mountains as the result of that collision. But nowadays, more so, what we're seeing crustal adjustments that are happening at rather low levels in the crust. And these adjustments happen every few years. The most recent geologic event that happened that we might point to, not saying this is the cause, but we might point to, is that 10 to 20 to 30,000 years ago, there was an ice sheet that stood at least a mile high, just above the Philadelphia region going up north toward the pole. And the weight of that ice depressed the crust. Now, the ice is long gone, but we're still seeing the reaction of the crust as it makes its way back up in some instances. Not saying that's specifically what's going on here, but that's one of the mechanisms that could be causing the crustal adjustment that we see on the East Coast occasionally.
Yeah, and so ultimately, just at its bare minimum here, Derrick, when we're talking about what causes an earthquake, just tell us a little bit more about that and just what we're feeling here. What did we just feel, and how does this happen?
Right. So what we're feeling is when the crust adjusts itself, you have two adjacent rock units moving past each other in one way or another, either up and down or sideways. And when that sudden movement occurs, it creates shock waves that travel out through the rock, and almost everything sitting on top of the rock will experience that vibration from the shock. So if you felt some minor vibration this morning, you felt that vibration because the rock units moved, created a shock wave, and you felt some of that shock.
Well, Derrick, we certainly felt it here in our newsroom and all around the region here. So we do appreciate your explanation, your expertise in this. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get back with you in just a bit to get more information from you. Right.